Hello and welcome to Create an Offset Pose with PoseMaster for DAZ Studio. We're going to create an offset pose for Millennium Dog so that we can apply Millennium Horse poses to the dog. So I've loaded both Millennium Horse and Millennium Dog into my scene. Now before I can start creating the offset pose, I need to write down the origin points of Millennium Horse. So I make sure the figure is selected. I zero Millennium Horse, zero figure pose. As you can see, it loaded into a default pose which is not the same as the zero pose. So we zero the pose first. Then I click on PoseMaster copy and I copy the zero pose to default. And now I click on PoseMaster delta. Now PoseMaster delta takes the difference between two poses. So it's going to take the difference of the current pose against the one we've saved previously, which is default. In this case, we're not concerned about creating a delta pose for the horse. We're just using PoseMaster delta to get the origin values for the horse. Let's go to our PoseMaster data directory. In my PoseMaster default install folder, there's a data subfolder, and in that is the default.psr. That's the file we just saved. I open that in my text editor, and below the mill horse section there's a position, rotation and scale subsections, and there's also an origin subsection. This origin subsection PoseMaster delta puts in here so that we can read the origin values. So the X, Y and Z origin values of the mill horse we need to write down. Then we scroll further down and we find the pelvis section, and again below pelvis there's a position, rotation, scale and an origin subsection. Again we make a note of these X, Y and Z values for the pelvis origin. When we've done that, we can go back to DAZ Studio. Now we can set about creating an offset pose for Millennium Dog. Select Millennium Dog and zero the figure. Then we take a snapshot of the zero pose. That's what the dog currently has, and we save that to default. Now we need to pose Millennium Dog so that it aligns as close as possible to Millennium Horse. Right, I've finished posing Millennium Dog. As you can see, we've got Millennium Dog posed in a way that as closely as possible reflects the mill horse zero pose. We do that so that when we apply the mill horse, any mill horse pose to mill dog, it will move into the right bone rotations. Take note, I did need to increase the scale of Millennium Dog 190% to get it the right size so that I can position it correctly. I'm going to select Millennium Dog's hip. The other thing to note is that I did not move the hip. I did not change the hip position at all in positioning the dog. I only changed the body position. There you can see the body position. So when we're setting it up here, you do not change the hip position because we're going to be applying a hip offset in the next step. Something else to note is where the figure's origin is. So if you look at Millennium Dog, the figure is selected, its origin point is here. If we select Millennium Horse, its origin point is nearby its hip. That's why we've made a note of the origins. We have to adjust those origin points so that Millennium Dog rotates correctly in a Millennium Horse pose. Now that we've aligned mill dog to mill horse, we are going to calculate the difference between mill dog's current pose and the zero pose we saved previously to default. And here we're going to now type the name of this offset pose. It's for mill dog, that's the target figure, and the offset is mill horse zero pose. Now let's go and look at the file we've just saved. In my PoseMaster data folder, here's the new file, mill dog mill horse zero pose. Let's open that, Now there are three things we need to do in this file. The Millennium Dog figure position we need to zero. We zero this because when we apply the pose next, we will have to move it back into position and take that position and apply it as a hip offset. So step 1, I zero the Millennium Dog position. Step 2, I need to put the Millennium Horse figure origin here as the Millennium Dog figure origin. So let me get those. So I'm going to paste that in here. There we go. That was the Millennium Horse figure origin, and now I need to take the Millennium Horse pelvis origin and put that in here where we have the Millennium Dog's hip origin. And I paste. So what we've done here, just to recap, we zeroed the figure position, we entered the Millennium Horse figure origin, and we entered the Millennium Horse pelvis origin. Now to activate those two origin sections, I have to remove the underscore. We're done, so we can save this file. Now we go back to DAZ Studio and we're going to zero the Millennium Dog pose. Let's zero that. And now we're going to paste, PoseMaster paste. We are now going to select the offset pose we've just created. Millennium Dog Mill Horse Zero pose. We select all three transforms: position, rotation, scale, recursive, and relative. An offset pose is designed to adjust another pose. So most often you will use an offset pose with a relative option selected, and click accept. Now what's happened here, if I select Millennium Horse, see where its origin is, and now I select Millennium Dog, see where its origin is. What we've done is we've got the Millennium Dog pose that puts it into the Millennium Horse Zero pose, and we've centered the origins of the two figures. All we need to do now is we need to move Millennium Dog back into position, but this time we move its hip. So now I select Millennium Dog's hip. There we go. We've now moved Millennium Dog back into position using its hip. Take note of the hip values, write those down because we have to enter those back into the offset file. Let's open the offset file again, and now we enter those few values under Millennium Dog's hip position. The X was 0, the Y was 6380, and the Z was minus 50.48. Again, we save the file and we go back to DAZ Studio. Once again, let's zero Millennium Dog's pose, click the whole figure, and now we're going to apply the offset pose again to see if it works. There we go. As you can see, Millennium Dog is now perfectly in position with Millennium Horse, and if I select both figures, Millennium Horse, Millennium Dog, we can see their origin points are aligned. Right, we finished creating the offset pose, so let's go and test it. Let's first zero our Millennium Dog's position, 0. And what we would like to do now is we would like to apply a horse pose. So from our Millennium Horse default poses, let's apply the gallop pose. We tried that earlier. We select PoseMaster copy and select the dog, and we say PoseMaster paste. Default pose, position, rotation, scale, and recursive. We unselect relative because we're not applying a relative pose. Now remember, in the previous tutorial we created the Mill Dog from Mill Horse skeleton map to ensure that the pose gets fully transferred to mill dog. So we select that and we click accept. Now we can see mill dog has adapted the pose from mill horse, but it's not perfect. Look at its legs and the head position. We need to apply the offset pose. So now we click paste again. This time, instead of pasting the default pose that we copied from mill horse, we select the mill dog, mill horse, 0 pose. That's the offset pose. We apply all three transforms recursively, but it's an offset pose, so we select relative. We do not need the skeleton map now, so let's click accept. There we go. As you can see, we've quite successfully now transferred the mill horse pose to mill dog. His legs look mostly in the right position, tail looks in the right position, head looks in the right position. And that's the combined effect of having a skeleton map and an offset pose. Before we finish, I just want to show you how to do the one-step pose transfer using the new skeleton map and offset pose. Let's reset Millennium Dog's position to the 0 pose again, and now we click PoseMaster transfer. The default pose is what we copied from mill horse. We select all three transforms, make sure we've selected the mill dog, mill horse 0 pose and skeleton map, click accept, and we see the same result. So that's the easy way of doing the transfer once we've set up the skeleton map in the offset file. That brings us to the end of this tutorial. Thank you.